right. So once again, hello everybody and welcome to the June edition of our Power BI online meetup. So this is going to be the second one that we'll be hosting. And I did a little bit of adjustment on the schedule that we had, because normally today we are supposed to go through data modeling and DAX, but I brought forward data preparation because I feel that one of the most important areas of data analysis has to do with preparing your data, because most times in real life, we don't get to work with excellent data. So what we use in most cases is what I call crazy data. So data come in different shapes and in different stupid ways, basically. And analysts have to deal with a lot when it comes to analyzing data, because they tend to spend most of their time putting data in order rather than doing the actual analysis. Okay, so today we'll be looking at a couple of things on how to use Power Query to achieve some of those issues in data cleaning and data management. So the learning outcome for today is, at the end of this webinar, I will expect that most of us should understand what a clean data structure looks like. So when we say data is clean, it means that at least we expect it to have a particular structure. And then we'll also look at how to combine Excel worksheets. So most of us, really, our data sources are Excel. So we don't get to work with databases most of the times, right? So if you work with the database, then lucky you are, because your data is most likely going to come in clean. But in most cases, we tend to work with files from other people. So what other people have as reports is what you have as your own data, right? And that is very, very unfortunate, because a report can be structured in any format whatsoever. But for you to do any analysis, or for you to carry out any data analytics, whether in Power BI or Excel or whichever tool you have there, there is a structure that your data needs to follow, right? So if someone else's report happens to be your own data, then you need to find a way to put that report into a data analysis structure format. Then we'll also look at how to combine Excel workbooks from a folder. So these are two different things: combine Excel worksheets and then combine Excel workbooks from a folder, because these are things that helps us a lot. So sometimes we have people that get to go to the office on weekends, probably especially at month ends, for example. So people get to go to the office because they need to combine a lot of data, and they think that there is no better way of doing this without knowing VBA or knowing some other interesting programming languages out there. But you have Power Query, and it can assist you in doing some of these things without even having to write any complex formulas if you need to at all, right? So today I'm going to be a facilitator again for the second month. So my name is Ahmed Oyelowo, and I'm a Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate for BI Reporting and also a Microsoft Certified Trainer. Then I also have a finance certificate as a Certified Advanced Financial Modeler from the Financial Modeling Institute. I train courses on Power BI, so Power Query alone can be a course. I hope you know that you can take up to 3 days alone learning how to use Power Query. I also train on financial modeling and data analysis and advanced data analysis and reconciliation, as well as data presentation. So currently I'm the managing partner and the lead trainer at Foresight BI and Analytics. So enough about me for now. So let's go to what we need to learn. So when we talk about data structures, we are saying that whatever data you get and you think you need to analyze, the first thing you need to do is to look at that data and ensure that it meets certain conditions or certain criteria. And some of these are what I have outlined here. So you need to look at your data and ensure that you don't have empty rows or empty columns. That's number one. Number two, you need to ensure that you have only a single row of headings. You need to ensure that you don't have totals or subtotals within your data. I will show you some of these things and highlight why you need to ensure that your data looks as clean as this. then you need to ensure that every column must have a unique data category. And finally, all dates of same category must be in a single column. So I'm going to go over to Excel now to try and show you some of these things. So if you have data that looks like this, basically, then I call you lucky because this data has met all the conditions for what we call a clean data structure. And what we said about having a clean data structure, the number one thing we say you need to look at is to ensure that you don't have empty rows or empty columns. So right now on Excel, if I would like to know whether I have an empty row and empty column, what I could just quickly do is stand somewhere. For example, let's say I'm currently standing on cell A1. I will just hold my control and my right arrow key on my keyboard to jump to the next cell that is not empty, right? So if I hold control and I jump to the right, I will see that I have everything covered all the way to the right. So that means I don't have any empty column. The same way, if I hold my control key and I go downwards, I see I have jumped to the last data I have at the bottom, which means I don't have any empty rows, right? Okay, so if I have an empty column, for example, let's say I have something somewhere here where I just have a space, Ctrl+Shift+, right? So if I come here and I hit my control right arrow key, I will see that it stops here, right? But if I go over to the right, you will see I still have data on the right-hand side. That means I have an empty column. The same way, if it was to be an empty row somewhere, and I come here and I hit control down arrow key, it will bring me here. It's going to stop here, but I still have data all the way to the bottom. And what makes this significant is that when you work with tools like database tools or Power Query or things like that, it's going to carry your data as a table, right? So, and a table is basically highlighting an area within your data, right? So a table doesn't have breaks. So for example, now, if I create an empty space here and I want to select all. So what is the shortcut key to select all? I think it's Control A. So if I press Control A now to select all, so I want to select all my data basically. So I press Control A, it's going to select only this area. So simply because of this space, that means this other area to the right is not going to be considered as part of my data. So you want to ensure that you don't have a break within your data, either on the rows or on the columns. So rule number one, don't have empty rows and don't have empty columns. So rule number two is that you should have only a single row of headings. So in most cases, for example, let's say you have files coming in like this, and somewhere at the top you have headings. So you have something like sales reports, and then you have January 2019. Okay, so this is sales report as at January 2019. This is what you have as your data. So what this means is that you have more than a single row of headings, because the first thing that should appear on your data should be your headings row, right? So simply because you now have this, you have this guy, and you have this guy here as well, that means you have 3 rows of headings, and you need to take care of that. So you need to make sure your data is having just a single row of headings, right? So rule number 3 is you should not have totals or subtotals, okay? So when we say totals or subtotals, we are basically saying, for example, if this is my data and I think I have a column, I have columns over here that have values. So you now have at the bottom of this, you have the totals of all of these guys. You should make sure that when you are importing this data for analysis, you don't take your totals with it. And the reason is that if you are doing something like, let's say you are creating an aggregate of a column, for example, you are going to be doing double counting because you have values that are already doing the summation of your columns, right? So any summation or any mathematical operation that you will now be doing within your data, you should make sure you do that in your data analysis. So don't go into analysis with your totals or subtotals. Rule number 4 is every column must have a unique data categories. So what we mean by that is this. So every column you have within your data must identify a particular data category, right? So this column A has other IDs. It means everything I should have all the way down here should be other IDs, right? So each of these columns likewise should contain the same unique type of data. If it doesn't have that, you need to find a way to make sure you clean that up. Rule number 5, which is basically similar to rule number 4, which says that every unique date that you have within your data should have their own column. So in most cases, for example, especially when you work with other people's reports as your own data, you see reports that come in something looking like this. I'm going to share another screen. Okay, so you see a report looking like this, for example. So you have April, July, October. So these are basically months, and it goes all the way to the right like this. So you can do a report that looks like this. But if you are going to take this data for analysis, you need to ensure that all of these guys, April, July, October, these are months, right? So if these are months, then it shouldn't be spread across the columns like this. What you should have is a single column that is going to be called month. And then in front of that column, you should have the values. So you have the values here. So if this is April, you have April here, and then you have whatever value is attached to that April somewhere here like this. So this is the only way you'll be able to do any meaningful analysis. Otherwise, what it means is that you are going to be you need to stress yourself in writing any formulas that is going to compute whatever analysis you are trying to do. Okay, so let's see how we can use Power Query to do some data clean. Okay, so what we want to try to do now is to try and clean up that data that has months spread across the column. So I'm going to have to come to the home tab within Power BI, then click on Get Data and select Excel. So Excel is my source. Then I want to pick this guy called Dirty. All right, so now I have this window that is showing me basically the kind of sheets that I have within that workbook. So I have just a single sheet there called sheet 1. I'm going to check this box. Then I'll click on edit. So basically, this is my data. I have a single column here for segments, which looks very fine. Then I have another column for April, I have another column for July, and I have other columns for the other months. And when we looked at the rules for clean data structure, we said every column must have a unique data category. So instead of having April, July, and October in different columns, they all need to come together inside a single column called months. Now, within Power Query, you can see that we have a lot of buttons inside of Power Query, and what I always advise is you don't need to know where a particular button is really. So if you are going to do a transformation that is going to affect the whole table, what you do is you come over the left-hand side and you look at this little icon that you have here. So all the transformation that you'll be doing within Power Query, you are going to have to be clicking on various buttons. For example, you can see a button here that says choose columns. You can see another button that says remove columns. And if I come to my transform tab, I have so many other buttons here. So Power Query can do up to 380 transformations. So we have buttons that can do more than or up to 380 different transformations, and it can be really, really difficult for you to know where a particular button you need to use lies, right? So what you always do is for any transformation you want to do, you need to ask yourself, am I going to apply this transformation to the whole table, or do I want it to affect only a particular column? So if you want it to affect only a particular column, what you do is you select that column, then you right click on the particular column, and you have a host of options that can let you achieve what you want. So these options here can take care of most of the dirty scenarios that we have. But if you are going to be doing a transformation that will affect a table as a whole, then you need to use this little button you have here that is going to transform the whole table as a whole, right? So in this case now, for example, so if I ask you, what do you think we need to do to this? Basically, we have a column that has segments, which is looking very fine, but all these other guys, we want them to come into a single column. So all the months should appear as one column. So within Power Query, we have two things that you can think can do that for us. So under this transform tab, you can see something called transpose. But don't make that mistake of using transpose here, because what transpose does is to flip your table in the opposite direction, right? So when you use transpose, what's going to happen is you are going to see that everything that is currently on columns is going to go to rows, and everything that is currently on rows is going to go to columns. So for example, if I just hit transpose now, so I will just click on this transpose, and what you see is that all the things that were previously on my rows, which are the segments, are now on columns. So you don't really want to do this, right? So instead of doing that, what I need to do is I would like this guy to stay the way it is, but I would like to flip all these other guys the other way around. So I want to transpose these guys to now come on rows. So rather than using transpose, what you do is to use something called on pivot. So I'm going to select this column and right click, like I said, and look for an option to unpivot. So I have three of them here. I have unpivot columns, I have unpivot other columns, and I have unpivot only selected columns. So unpivot is basically going to twist whatever data you have there and flip it in the opposite direction. So now I've selected segments and I want to flip all these other guys towards the right. So what I need to do is to select unpivot other columns. So once I select unpivot other columns, you'll see that I now have months and I have values. And all I need to do is basically double click inside this heading and just change this guy to months, and double click here to change it to maybe amount or sales or whatever. And with this, you can now load this for any analysis. So that is just an example of how you transform data within Power Query. So the first thing you need to do is identify what is wrong with that data. That is the first thing. Then the second thing is you ask yourself, do you want to perform a transformation that is going to affect the whole table? Or do you want to perform a transformation that will affect particular columns? So if your transformation is going to affect particular column, then you select that column and right click and look for an option that can do that for you. But if your transformation is going to affect the whole table, then you need to come and select this little icon you have around this area so you can see options that work on whole table. Okay, so the next thing I want to do now is to show how do you consolidate Excel worksheets with Power Query. So I have something here. So let me know if you can see this Excel worksheet I'm opening now. Does someone have a question? Okay. So I have this Excel workbook that has data for various regions. So you have the West, you have Central, East, and Southern region. But if you are going to do any analysis on this, basically you will need to combine all the worksheets together, right? So you need to combine all of the worksheets so you can have one standard set of data for your analysis. So how do you do this using Power Query? So I'm going to go over now to Power BI. All right. So you would like to combine all the worksheets in the workbook. All right. So come to Get Data, select Excel as your source, then select the Excel workbook, open. So you can see all the 4 worksheets that you have within that workbook. So what some people will do is basically check the box for each one of them. So check, 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 and check. So I've checked the 4 of them. Then I'll click on edit. So now that I've clicked on edit, if you look to the left-hand side of my Power Query window, so you see I now have 5 queries. So this is the first one, which I don't really need now. So I can just right click on this one and delete. So delete this guy. Now I have this my 4 regions that I would like to combine. So what a lot of people will do is to come here and then go to the home tab and go over here towards the right where you have combine and do append queries, right? So under append queries, we have 2 options. You can do append queries or you can do append queries as new. So if you do append queries as new, what it means is you have an additional query here that's just going to be a combination of the 4 Excel worksheets that you have here. But if you use append queries, it simply means that all the other workbooks or worksheets are going to be combining to whichever query you have selected. So let me just go and use append queries as new. So append queries as new, I have this dialog box. So how many tables do I want to combine? So I'm not combining 2 tables. I want 3 or more. So I'll select this guy, 3 or more tables. So I already have Central Superstore here. So I'll just select East, click Add, select South, click Add, select West, and click Add. Then I'll hit OK. And then I have a new table that has a combination of all of those regions. So if I scroll over to the right-hand side and I click on this drop-down for regions, I click load more, you see that I have all my regions, right? So, but the problem with this approach is basically, if, for example, let's say the data you are working with has to do with months. So January, February, March, April, and let's say every new month, you add a new worksheet to your workbook, right? So it simply means that if you use this approach, when the next month comes in, you will need to come and edit your append query to pick up the other file, right? So this is not the best route to go when you want to append workbooks, when you want to join worksheets together. So I'm going to close and apply this, and I'll take it all over again. So as you can see, this is going to load 5 queries for me. Of course, I could have gone inside the query editor to uncheck what I don't want to load, but that is all stressful. So the best approach for you to do this is to load all the Excel worksheets at the same time. So you're not going to use the append query method. All right, so doing this all over again, get data, Excel, Superstore, and click open. So now, instead of selecting each of these worksheets to check the boxes like this, what I could do is select this folder itself, right click on that folder and select edit. Okay, so the name of the workbook is Superstore, and you can see in the box within this, after the Superstore, you can see 4. So meaning this has 4 worksheets. So I'm just going to select on this Superstore itself, that is selecting the whole workbook, then right click and select edit. So now this is what I have. I have a single query that has everything I need. So what we call this is you have a bunch of columns that could be confusing at times, but these are all what we call metadata. So metadata is basically a description of the kind of features you have within your data. So the first column you have is the name column, which is basically the sheet. Then you have a column for data. You have another column for item, for the kind, and hidden. So hidden is basically looking at whether you have that worksheet hidden or not. So we have something here that is hidden, which we don't really need here. So I'm just going to come here and uncheck the one that is true. So I don't want the hidden guy. Then I'll ask myself, all of these guys that are here, all these columns that I can see here, which one of them do I really need to work with? So basically, what I need to work with is the data. So like I said, these other columns are metadata, so you don't need them. You just need to work with the data itself. Of course, there are instances where you might need to do all of those guys. You might need to use these other guys. So, but for here, we are using this data column. So I'll just select this data column, and guess what I need to do? I want to remove all the other columns, right? So this is a transformation on a single column. So what I'll do is I'll select data column. I'm going to right click here and I'll select remove other columns. Okay. So remove other columns. Then I need to expand this table. So I have 4 tables here, but I can't see the data yet, right? So for me to see the data, I need to expand this and drill down. So I'll use this double arrow at the top of this heading. Click on this double arrow. Then uncheck this box. This is the most useless option I've ever seen in Power Query. Use original column name as prefix. I don't know where this becomes useful. So I'll uncheck that box and click OK. Right. So, and in one step, I already have all the worksheets that I need within this query. All I now need to do is to find a way to make this first row the heading. So this first row, I need to find a way to make it the heading. So I don't need to have column 1, column 2 showing as headings, right? Now, this is a transformation that has to do with the whole table, right? So I'm not going to right click on any column this time around. What I'll do is I'll come to use this, my little button here, and look for an option that can carry the first row and make it the headings of the table, since this is going to affect the whole table. So I'll use this guy and say use first row as headers. So otherwise, what you would have done is to go and start going through each of these tabs to see which of them is going to work, which is currently this guy. So this is going to do the same thing for you, but you have to navigate through tabs. So which is why I said, instead of looking for where to find a particular button, if you are transforming on a table, use this little button here. If you are transforming on the column, select the column and right click. Now, because I have used the first row as headings and I have 4 different workbooks. So this is where you need to be careful, because each of those workbooks have their own headings, right? Since each of them have their headings and I've used the first row of the first one as the headings, I need to make sure that I remove the heading rows from the other workbooks, right? So remove the heading rows from other workbooks, because I've combined everything together now and you should have only a single row of headers. So to do that, what I need to do is to uncheck anywhere I see a heading row, just uncheck that heading from there, right? So, but the best way for me to do that is if I come to this row ID, what I'm looking for is within this column, I will look for something that is also called row ID. Then I'll uncheck, right? But the best way you need to use to do that is go and look for a column that has the least number of unique items. So row ID is going to appear so many times, but ship mode, for example, is just going to appear a couple of times. So I'll come to the ship mode column, click on this drop down, then click load more. And what I expect to have here is basically either first class, same day, second class, or standard class. But somewhere there, I have something else called ship mode. So this other ship mode that you see here actually stands for the heading rows for all the other 3 worksheets. So I'm just going to uncheck this guy, ship mode, then I'll hit OK. And I now have a clean data I can load for analysis. So the difference between this method and the other method of appending is if a new worksheet is being added to that workbook right now that has the same structure as the other worksheets, automatically this is going to pick it up on refresh. So let's assume instead of having regions, what we're combining together is months. So January, February, March, April. Then May comes and you add a May worksheet to that workbook. All you need to do is click on refresh, and this is going to capture your new May, and whatever analysis that you have done on top of that is going to be updated. Now let's go and look at how do we combine folders. So how do we combine Excel workbooks from folders. So right from here, from this window, I'm going to select new source. And this time around, I'll just click more because I want to connect to a folder. Select folder. Then I'll have to browse to where I have that folder. I have it here, data prep, and I'm connecting to folder 1. I'll click OK, click OK. All right, so now when you're connecting to a folder with Power Query, what you see is the list of all the workbooks you have within that folder. In other cases, maybe it's not workbooks, it's not .xlsx files. You could have CSV files, you could have text files, but as long as you are connecting to a folder, the first column that you always have is always going to be a binary content column, right? So sometimes a lot of people use this combine and edit feature, which is basically going to automatically combine all the workbooks or all the contents of that folder. But I don't advise you use this method. Use this edit. Now, if you remember, I said when you have a window like this, showing things like name, extension, and things like this, you basically have what we call metadata, and you need to identify what is really, really important for you to use, right? So in this case, all I need to use is this content column. That is what is important for me. So I'm going to right click on content and remove other columns. Right, so I'm left with this guy, binaries. So binaries is just 0 and 1, it's computer language. And I have 9 binary files in this, my query. But what I need to do is to be able to extract the workbook that lies within this binary. So I don't need binary, I need Excel tables basically. So I'm going to go to Add Column tab and I'll select Custom Column. So I need to write a simple line of code that is going to extract the Excel workbook from this binary. So this new column name, I'm going to call this extract. And then I'll use an M function called Excel.workbook, open bracket. So Excel.workbook is a function that can do this for me. Then I'll just double click on this content here. It will fly inside my formula. Then I'll put a comma and I'll type in true, close brackets, and hit OK. So now I have a new column that has tables rather than binary, which means this contents column is now useless to me, right? So I'll right click on contents column and remove. Then I have 9 tables. But these 9 tables, I have workbooks within them, right? So I need to drill down for me to be able to see the data I have within these 9 tables. So I will just click on this double arrow on the top right-hand side here. I have a couple of metadata yet again. So what I could do is unselect everything and pick only the data, right? But if I don't want to do this, let's say I just have everything selected all over again and I click OK. Is metadata. And at this point, I will now say this is what I need. I will now right click this guy and say remove the other columns, right? But rather than doing this, what I could do is if you want to go back on a step in Power Query to adjust some of the settings that you have there, just come back to your applied steps area. You will see a little icon that looks like settings, like star on that step. So you just click on that icon and it will show you back the selections you've made on the other steps. So I will just go back and uncheck everything and bring in only data, then click OK. So I have just a single column with my data tables. Then I'll drill down again and click OK. So now I have 9 workbooks combined in this query. All 9 workbooks are currently on this query. And the last thing I probably need to do is to now set data types. So this row ID, I'm going to set data type to either text or number. So I'm going to use text. Order ID, I'll use text. Now, how tedious can that be, right? So if you have to go through each of the columns one after the other to set the types, it can be very, very tedious if you have a lot of columns. So what you could do is hold your control key and select columns that are going to use the same types. Then you use what? You use a right-click option to find what you need to do. So I will hold row ID, hold control and select order ID, hold control and select ship mode, customer ID, customer name. I'll scroll over to the right-hand side, select this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. Postal code, region, product ID, category. So just make sure I have everything selected properly. Okay, so all of these guys are going to have text data, right? So I can now right click on any of the headings here, then come to change type and select text. So I've done that transformation for all of those columns at the same time. Then I'll come here and change my dates to date type. Scroll over to the right again, then select all my values columns. Hold the first one. I can hold my shift key and select the last one. Right click, change type, and select decimal number. So this is how you'll be able to combine data that is coming in from a folder, assuming that your data is coming in clean based on the structure that we discussed. So let's take a look at the data we have that we have just combined now. So let's take a look at that data. So if I open this, my folder up, folder 1, and I just open one of them. Let me just open the April workbook. So this is the April workbook. This is how the data looks like from the folder that we just combined. So you can see that the very first item that we have here is the headings row, right? So this is the headings row and everything looks very, very clean. So that is why we use that function to combine called excel.workbook, which is the M function. And then we typed in a code there to say comma true. So that comma true basically does two things. So when you use comma true within the excel.workbook function, what is going to happen is it will automatically promote the headings. That is one. Then secondly, it's going to delay what we call types. So Power Query is not going to help you to set data types for each of the columns. You have to do that on your own. That is the downside of using comma true. So if you have an Excel folder whereby each of your worksheets actually starts from, each data you have in the worksheet or workbook starts from the first row. So the first thing you have on each one is your headings, and you want to combine that from a folder, then the function you will use is excel.workbook, comma true. So we are saying that if what you have looks like this, the first thing you have within your data is the headings row, and you want to combine so many of them from the same folder, you use this function, this line of code, excel.workbook, comma true. But let's take a look at another scenario. So I'm going to go back and open folder 2 and open another April file. Okay, so on this particular one, you can see that the first thing I have here is not the headings row. So I have two rows that basically contain data. So one says the sales data, the other one carries the month. And then I now have an empty space. Then I have the headings row. Now, if you use the same function to run that query, use the same excel.workbook, comma true, to combine this folder, you are going to run into problems because it's going to think that this is your heading and it's going to promote this as the headings. So we're going to use a separate method to combine something that looks like this, right? So I'll just close this guy, then go back to Power Query. Again, I'll go to Home, I'll go to New Source, and I'll click More. Then I'll double click on Folder. Browse, and I want to go to my data prep folder, and I want to select folder 2. Okay, so click Edit. So same method, I have a bunch of metadata. I have only one column that I need. I'll select that column, right click, and I'll say remove other columns. Then I want to make sure that I do away with this binary. I want to extract the workbooks that lie in there. So I'll come to add column, select custom column, and I'll call this guy extracts. Of course, you can call it any name you like, but I just like to use this name to indicate what I'm trying to do. Then in the custom formula box, I'll type excel.workbook, open brackets. Now I'm not going to put, once I select this content, I am not going to put comma true. I'll just close my bracket and I'll hit OK. So we'll see what difference this makes. Then I'll select my contents column now, right click and remove. So once I remove this guy now, I can expand this. So I have 9 tables. I will expand that. Of course, uncheck everything except the data. Then click OK. Now I have the data tables. I will expand this again and click OK. So the difference now is this, right? So I now need to carry out the steps that command true has done for me. I need to do that manually, right? So I have 9 workbooks. Each of those workbooks always has the first thing as sales data, and then the second thing as the month, and then the final thing as an empty, then the next thing as an empty row, then the 4th row actually has the headings, right? So I need to do a transformation that will automatically eliminate the first 3 rows from each of the workbooks, right? So eliminate the first 3 rows for each of the 9 workbooks that I have, or any other workbook that I intend to add into that folder. So I need to look for a smart way for me to do that. So what I could do, basically, I could come here because I want to do this transformation on the whole table, right? You feel so? So if I come here to look for an option, I can see something that says remove top rows, right? So if I click on remove top rows, the option I have is number of rows to remove. And I would think I need to remove 1, 2, 3 rows. So if I remove these 3 rows, this is going to happen only on the very first workbook that I have. So I can't use this option because what I want to do is remove the first 3 rows for each of the workbooks. So I need to find a smart way to do that. And that smart way is go to look for a column that you are sure is always going to have data entry. Are we together? So look for a column that will always have a data entry, because in Power Query, when you have an empty cell or an empty value, that is where you have the null value, right? So if I come here now, for example, and I click on this drop down to uncheck null, what is going to happen is, so let me just click uncheck null from here and hit OK. So what's going to happen is that row number 3 that we previously had there is going to be gone, right? So the whole row will be gone. So I'll just come and reverse that here, delete that step. So I need to look for a column that I know that will always have values, such that if I remove the null from that column, it's going to leave me with only items that has values, right? So I can use the order ID column, for example, because I know there will always be an order ID for each transaction. So I'll click on the drop down here under column 2, then I'll uncheck null and click OK. Now, that single step has basically eliminated the first 3 rows for each of my workbooks. Now, the next thing I need to do now is to use my first row as headings, which is a transformation that's going to affect all the tables, right? So I'll select this guy and use first row as headers. And finally, you don't want to miss this. The last thing you need to do is to remove the heading rows from the other, how many workbooks? That is the other 8 workbooks, because we have just used first row as headings, right? So we use first row as headings, but we need to remove headings from the other 8 workbooks. So just like we did the other time, go and look for a column that has the least number of unique items, so which is ship mode. So click on the drop down for ship mode. Then you click on load more, and you want to uncheck anything that has ship mode, right? So what I expect is first class, same second class, and standard class. So you uncheck ship mode and click OK. All right, so that works fine. Now I just need to change my data types for any of the columns that is currently not properly set. So row ID, make that a text. And when I scroll to the right-hand side, I need to make postal code, and these guys also make them text. I mean, these guys are values, so transform, change type, and make them decimal number. Now, if I go over to my applied steps area, so if I go over to the right-hand side and I look at my applied steps, you will see that Power Query at some point, after the promoted header step, Power Query tries to be smart and look at what I have within each column, and it tries to basically identify what data type it belongs to, right? So after the promoted header step here, another step was added by default called the change type step, which basically now transforms most of the columns into the correct data types. And all I needed to do at this last change type step is to look for which of the columns is not properly set. And then I just use my change type to set them correctly. So now that I have all of these guys done now, I've combined 9 folders from folder 1 and folder 2. If I have extra additional data to add, all I need to do is copy the Excel files and dump them within the folders, and then I'll just come in and refresh. So let me just remove these other guys. So delete. Yeah, it's open somewhere. All right, so I have folder 1 and I have folder 2. If I go to the home tab and I hit close and apply, okay. So close and apply, I have the 2 folders here. So let's say I just come here now and I just select, let me look for months. Okay, so I'll just come here and bring in month. So month, and let's say sales, so month and sales. So month and sales from folder 1, right? So month and sales from folder 1, you can see that I have January all the way to October. And then if I just go over to my data source now, so I go to extra 1 and I pick from October all the way to December, copy these guys, Ctrl C, come here to folder 1 and I paste that here, Ctrl V. Then I'll go back here to my Power BI and I will just refresh this. So on that refresh, you can now see that the new Excel file I've added to that folder has been added to my query in the background, and automatically it has also transferred to this my data table visual. So the same thing will happen if I do this on the other folder as well, which is folder 2. So folder 2 is a guy that looks funny. So I'll create the same thing on folder 2. So I want to bring in month. And sales. Let me just increase the size. So the same way I have January all the way to October for the ship month, then I'll go over back to my source, copy from October to December, Ctrl C, come back here, go to folder 2 and paste that. Then I'll go back to Power BI and I'll refresh this. So folder 2 will also update as well. So,
all right, Amit, thank you very much for this presentation. It's quite very useful. I just wanted to ask 2 questions that I already put in the chat. The first one is when you have dates, like months coming as text, when you have months coming as text, are you saying that Power Query will automatically see them as months just by changing the format or the data type?
No. So if you have a month that comes as text, that's proper January, February, March. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'll do now is I'll just go over to Power BI. So let me share my screen. So can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to click on enter data to try and bring in some dummy data now. So you have something like this, for example, you have month, and then let's say I have January, I have February, I have March. Then I click on edit. So this will automatically come as text data type. So if you look on the right hand side, you can see that the change type step was automatically applied. But if I try to do this now and convert this guy to date, replace current, what I get is an error, right? But let's say I don't have January typed in as text ordinarily like that. So let's say I have something like this. If I go back to that, my enter data. So let's say I had another column now, and I call this one 2 month, and this guy, okay, so this is month 2. Then I'll call this one January 2014. February 2014, March 2014. So these are actual text now. It's not like formatting, they are actual text. And did I load that? Okay, so now if I try to do this all over again, and let's say I try to convert this now to a date. So I try to convert this guy now to date. This is going to work because Power Query is going to be smart enough to understand that January 2014 is a date, but an ordinary January is probably just a month name or something, just name of month, which is really a text.
Okay, so what you advise is when we have something like that, it would be nice to just, like, let's say, add a suffix to it, like the month, the year, add the year as suffix, and then we can easily convert it to month. But I think that will be faster. All right.
Yes, so that will make sense. Yes.
All right, thanks. So my other question, although I already posted that, is I observed that when you combine this multiple Excel files from a folder, and you go through the combine and edit route.
Yes.
Yeah, it will load several useless metadata and all of that into the query.
Yes.
But I observe also that it also helps to like quickly format the data types than having to come and do it one after the other like we're doing, because some of the data I have to work with, I mean, we're talking about several columns, and it's faster for me if Power Query can actually just do the data type much in a faster way so that I don't have to go through the manual scanning process. What do you think?
Okay, so you basically always use the combine and edit, right?
Yeah, so that I don't have to do the formatting and data types manually.
Let me just try something now. Let me try out something. New source folder. So I will tell you some of the reasons why I like to write the code myself is for future proof, basically, because let's say you use the combine and edit, of course it's going to be fine too, but I really don't like all the, it's just a personal opinion, basically. I don't like all the plenty queries that comes along with the combine and edit.
For me, that's one downside.
Take the pain. Sorry?
I said for me, that's one downside. You have several useless queries coming in.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to use folder 2 now. I'm going to use folder 2. Then click OK. Then combine and edit. The Zoom file is making okay. Then you do you still have to do this? Hello?
Most of the time, I really don't have to do that.
Okay, so here is the case now. If your, let's say your data doesn't start from column 1 like I explained earlier, it looks something like this. Do you still use combine and edit?
Now, definitely you still have to do all of this cleaning and all of that. Exactly. But what I'm saying, of course, if you have data like dirty data like this, of course, you have to go through all the cleaning and all of that. Even if you don't do combine and edit, you still have to do this.
Yes.
But when you have maybe you have a structured database you are pulling data from, where you don't really have to do, I mean, you are sure where the data is coming from. Combine and edit as you find. The only issue I have is all those extra queries that come because of the metadata and all of that. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. So do we have other people that have questions as well? All right. So in the absence of any further questions, we should just call this a wrap for the June edition of the Power BI Meetup, online meetup. So apologies for starting this very late. So hopefully the next time we are going to start much earlier, and then we can cover more grounds and probably not skip most of the things that I had to skip so that I can finish this on time. So thank you everyone for joining in, and see you next month. Bye.